Hello, friends, and welcome back to a bonus episode of the Jank Tank. My name is Timothy Zaccanino. I'm going to be your host for today. No Teld, no Chris. You probably already know what's happening here. We have a guest that I will introduce in just a little bit. You clicked the title to get here, so you already know who we're talking about. But before we bring that guest on, I do want to mention that we actually had an episode lined up for this weekend. It was going to be the start of our Build a Cube series, but we lost some of our audio in the recording process, so we weren't able to put out an episode this week. We do, however, have this bonus episode going on where we get to talk with a fun guy about some fun stuff. So that's why you didn't see a full-length episode. We will be back normal schedule with our Lost Caverns of Ixalan review next weekend, so keep an eye out for that. A couple things before we bring our guest in here. Remember, wherever you're listening to this, you can find links to our Discord community, the Jank Diver Gaming Discord, where we host all of our drafts, all of our cube drafts. We talk about limited, we talk about all the good stuff, and we actually got some really cool news earlier this morning that we have been invited to the, what do they call these? The early streamer events for the Lost Cavern of Ixalan. Now, I don't know if that's going to be myself or Chris or Teld or someone else from the community actually streaming, but we will be doing some stream content, probably limited drafts, maybe some constructed for Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So be on the lookout for more news next week on that once we've solidified who's actually going to be doing it. Burying the lead a little bit here, let's go ahead and bring on our guest. I've got here with me Cube aficionado, Mr. Theo McGrath. If you recognize that name, it's because he was absolutely tearing it up at CubeCon last weekend. And he has joined me today to talk about his experiences with CubeCon, maybe his relation to Cube in general. But Theo, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hey, what's up? I'm good. Yeah, I'm a fellow member of the Jank Diver server, and yeah, I went to CubeCon last weekend, and it was awesome. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, we decided since Theo didn't completely scrub out, we would go and bring him on to talk about his experiences. And this just interview style. We want Theo to talk about not just his experience, but CubeCon as a whole for those of us who couldn't go. I know Theo, you were there. You've gone before. We had a couple other members from the Jank Diver community go. I know Aaronix, Glimpse, Broccoli Rob, Joe Anderson, who did a huge write-up on his experience there. It's my understanding that you actually met some of the other people from the community.
Yeah, I did. I met up with a couple of them. They were playing. I'm afraid I'm going to forget which person in real life is which Discord username, probably. But one of them had a mono red Dan that they were playing that was pretty fun, which is like, I don't know if you know Dan.
Yeah. What's the creature for red Dan?
It was a 2-mana 4/4, and it can only attack if the opponent has no untapped lands. It was definitely interesting. It was all like land destruction. It was veteran brawlers from
oh god,
I don't know, Legions or Prophecy or something. Anyway, I watched them play. It was an interesting format, to say the least.
Yeah, and I promise we won't be talking about hands this time. I don't know where that all came from, but I guess there's a meme somewhere in our community about people's hands, whatever. Anyway, moving on from that. So if you know Theo's name from anywhere, you probably know him by Discord name, theopolist. You joined us when we first started, and I believe you're almost like a household name when it comes to the Arena Cuban communities, right? It feels like anytime I join another community, you're just there drafting with them. And you have, I think it's fair to say you have a little bit of a reputation, right, of being maybe like the end boss for Arena Cubes and stuff like that. It feels like, somebody new will join our community, they'll join a draft, they'll see you there, and they'll be like, oh, Theo's here, I guess I'm going to lose tonight, like that sort of thing. And I don't know, a lot of the questions I want to ask is kind of how that translated to your mentality when you went to CubeCon. But before any of that, before actual CubeCon stuff, I think I would rather give you just a moment to kind of introduce who you are, your relation to Cube, if you want to tell people your social security number, anything like that. Just how long have you been Cuban, playing Magic, who are you, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, sure. I guess I started playing Magic, let's see, during Ikoria, or around Ikoria or M21. I started playing on Arena. So that was about, I don't know, four years ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly. During COVID. So I started
2020.
playing online. And, Yeah, the first time I drafted Cube was, I guess it was probably with you guys on the Jank Diver server.
You just picked it up right away? Because
pretty much,
you kind of came in like running hot. Like you ever since we've known you, we just assume you've been playing for a long time. I wouldn't have guessed 2020 or anything.
No, I haven't really been playing for that long. Yeah, like I said, started playing on Arena. I got into Paper a couple years later, like playing Modern, Pioneer, and stuff. And ever since I found Cube, it's just been my favorite format pretty much. I think like it has the best parts of Limited, where you get to draft and build your own deck, and Constructed, where you get to like do fun, high power level, high interaction games and stuff like that. So yeah, now I've been cubing like in Paper for a few years. I've had a few different play groups in various parts of the United States, and yeah.
Do you actually own a Paper cube?
No, I don't. I keep saying I'm gonna make one, but I haven't gotten around to it. No.
It's a bit of a chore to do it. We're blessed, #blessed, to be able to do it through like Cube Cobra and Arena and stuff like that. But I maintain a Paper cube. I never play it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the hardest part is getting 7 people in real life to meet up and play the cube. So yeah,
exactly. So CubeCon, Madison, Wisconsin, I believe, is where it was held. It was brought to my attention last week that this. For some reason, I thought this was only the second year that CubeCon has happened, but
no, it is. That's right.
Oh, is it? That's what I thought, but then Teld and Chris told me that it's been going on for a little while, and
they might be confused because it was supposed to happen earlier, but then COVID like delayed it.
Okay, so this actually was.
This is the second one.
Okay, well, I mean, obviously you're a huge cuber. That brought you to CubeCon. Pretty straightforward there. Before we get into like the actual logistics of CubeCon and your experience there, I did want to ask you just kind of a somewhat personal question. Like I said, you kind of have this reputation, especially within our community, of being like the person who shows up and is likely to 3-0 or 2-1 or something like that, build a super efficient deck no matter what the cube is, go for the high power level cards. And I think people refer to you as a spike, a highly competitive player, somebody who's looking for efficiency and looking to win. First question is, do you like consider yourself a spike? Like, do you think that's accurate, or do you think that's not accurate? And second, is that the mentality you went to CubeCon with? Like, what was your goals going to CubeCon? Did you want to win all the cubes? Did you want to be on the leaderboard? Or were you just going to have a fun time and what happens, happens?
That's a good question. I guess in terms of like player demographics, I'm definitely a spike as opposed to a Timmy or a Johnny. Mm-hmm. I think I have a little bit of a Johnny, in me, where I like finding cool combos and synergies and stuff. But if I had to pick one, it would definitely be a spike. I don't think of it as like when I go to draft something, I don't think of it as like, okay, I'm going to spike this. I think it's just like how I draft something. I just like try to take the good cards and draft a good deck. I mean, right. I've got like color preferences just like anyone else.
Grixis.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of CubeCon, I mean, my goal mainly is to just draft a bunch of cool cubes I've never played before, and I definitely accomplished that. I'm trying to win the drafts I play, not to such an extent that I'm like trying to, be super spiky and like ankle shooting people or anything, but
right.
Yeah, no, I think part of the fun for me is definitely like competition. But yeah, CubeCon itself is not like I guess maybe we'll talk about this more later. It's like somewhat competitive, but it's also like there's not really any real stakes, and the rules enforcement level is like still kind of casual. So it's
yeah, and I'm sure there are cubes that have like weird rules anyway that
there are definitely some weird rules. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is another question I wanted to ask is like. I've never been to CubeCon. I didn't go last year. I believe you went last year, or you went this year, so you kind of have a better idea of the structure of it, obviously, having attended it yourself. For the people who weren't able to go or haven't gone or maybe are looking forward to this because it feels like it really blew up this year, what's the structure for CubeCon, right? So I imagine like it's GP style, bunch of tables laid out, convention center type thing. What, like, you walk into CubeCon, do you just sit down at a table and you're like, I'm drafting this cube? Are there time slots? Like, how do you actually go about choosing the cubes that you're joining up with? And, like, what's the structure like just in kind of layman's terms?
Sure, I'll go over it. Basically, the event is from Thursday till Sunday, right? So you have 4 days. On the first day, on Thursday, it's just like a free play, basically. So you can just you walk into like a convention hall. It's actually part of a larger convention called Game Hall, where there's like other tabletop games. But the CubeCon section is just like, a whole bunch of tables, basically. There are about, I think, 400 something people in total, maybe 500 if you include all the judges and whatnot. So it's a lot of people. I think it's like double last year. Yeah, anyway, on Thursday, it's free play. You can just go, people will be like firing cubes all day. You can go and just, if you want a cube, like you'll be able to find someone, basically. There were some like scheduled events. There was, like a rotisserie draft of a vintage cube that people did like in paper, in person, that's always pretty fun. There was some kind of, thing that involved Reed Duke winning a bunch of cheese because it was Wisconsin. I don't exactly know what that was, but that was funny.
I did not hear about that, but
it's called The Cheese Stands Alone.
You know what? He did post about that on Twitter. Now that I think about it, I didn't realize cheese was the reward for it, though.
Yeah, there was a Wisconsin versus England team draft, grudge match with like some pro/celebrity players. So those were just like events that you could watch. But otherwise, on Thursday it was just people playing all day. And then on Friday and Saturday it was like the main event, right? So there's this website called the Hedron Network where basically you would rank your cube choices that you wanted to draft. So like everyone would rank their cubes, so you could rank as many as you want, and then they would have like an algorithm basically to assign people to pods. And then there were three drafts on each day, Saturday and Sunday, which was a lot. It basically takes like all day from like 9 a.m. to like, I don't know, 10 p.m. if you decided to do all of them. Yeah, so Friday and Saturday were the same. And then on Sunday, they would cut to the top 64 players out of like 400 something, like I said. So basically you had to have a pretty good record to make top 64, like at least average of like 2 winning or maybe getting a couple trophies, something like that.
So the top 64 was decided by basically how many
just by your record.
People won?
Yeah, you get like 3 points per match win, basically, and then if you trophy, you get like an additional bonus point. And so the cutoff was like 37 points, something like that, which basically meant you had to at least trophy one draft and then do pretty well in all the rest. So it was a pretty high bar, I would say. And then out of the top 64, they would split into 8 pods of 8, right? And then the winner of each of those drafts would go to the top 8.
So then eight different cubes were represented in the top 64, right? Do you know how they went about choosing which cubes from among everybody were used in the top 64?
That's a good question. So I think in total there were maybe 30, ballpark like 30 cubes. I don't know exactly, maybe 25. And then after the main event, they had a lot of data about like which ones were most popular. So I think they did kind of a combination of picking the most popular ones and also like kind of hand selecting ones that were maybe not like super crazy, like silver border type ones, because maybe they wanted it to be a little bit more competitive.
Right. I know Emma's Peasant Cube was in there from TCG Player.
Yeah, there was Emma's Peasant Cube. There was like the vintage cube that was like kind of like the Magic. Well, the top 8 was actually the Magic Online vintage cube, but there was like another vintage cube. There was pretty much just like fan favorites, for the top 64. Yeah.
We recorded last Sunday. Obviously, lost the footage. Different story, but I think that Sunday morning, right before we recorded, like you had posted that, hey, I'm like in literal first place. And I know there was something weird where you got bumped down to like second or third or something, and then somebody's points were counted wrong, and so you ended up actually just being in first place. But you went into top 64 as like the number 1 seed, right?
Yeah, that's right. So after 6 drafts on Friday and Saturday, I was ranked number 1. I trophied 4 of the drafts, and then I went 2-1 in the other 2, which basically meant I was tied with Reed Duke for first place, and my tiebreakers were better than his. So yeah, I was ranked number 1.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, we were rooting for you, and I know you didn't end up in first place. Do you know what your overall record was by the end of the weekend? Or standings, rather, maybe not record.
I think I was like in 4th or something by the end, but basically they just kept adding points to people, so if you made the top 8, you would just keep getting more points. So like, really the standings don't make much sense after the top 8 happens. But anyway, yeah, my record was like, let's see, I 3-0'd 4 drafts and then I 2-1'd 3 drafts. So whatever that is, like 18 and 3, I think. in matches.
Yeah, high enough to be in like the top 10 players who were there. There was another cut to top 8 after the 64, like the 8 best players.
So it was just the winner of each pod.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Whoever 3 out each pod. Yeah.
And what did they draft for the top 8?
Yeah, the top 8 was the Magic Online Vintage Cube,
okay.
A paper copy, obviously.
Did they have like actual paper power there?
Yeah, they did. They found someone who was willing to like loan them actual power. So yeah, there's no proxies allowed in the main event cubes because I guess it's like some affiliated with Wizards,
sure.
And they don't like that. There were definitely a lot of cubes with proxies like in that people were just drafting on the side, and that was totally okay. I played at least a couple cubes that were proxied. But yeah, in the main event there were no proxies, which means that I think there were 2 vintage cubes there, which meant 2 people had actual power cards, which was pretty wild. But
super cool. I mean, I'm sorry you didn't make it to top 8, but it still sounds like you kind of tore up the competition there. Like just waking up Sunday and seeing that you were like not just on the leaderboard, but literal number 1. Next to like Reed Duke, Sam Black, all these like established names and stuff.
That was pretty fun. I definitely can't complain about how I did, given that I was ranked in first place. I will say that Reed Duke had to concede one of his.
I saw that. Yeah,
2 losses was because he had to go play in some like trivia competition. So that one, he drafted and then he like said to his round 1 opponent, "I'm really sorry, I have to go do this event." So then he left and then came back and then won rounds 2 and 3 in the draft.
Amazing.
So he really only lost 1 time in the main event, and then 1 time in the top 64 also, I think.
Yeah, congrats to him too. Yeah. That's just an awesome run.
I'll take it, but that's what you gotta do to be ranked above Reed, I guess.
Yeah, you need them to go play trivia instead of playing one of the matches. So there's no, I know it's kind of like, it's more about networking and community and just casual playing stuff, but there's no like trophy for first place or anything like that. You're not like CubeCon king.
There were some pretty cool play mats. They gave the top 8 each got a play mat, and then the champion got another play mat, I think. There were some prizes, like some sleeves and stuff for like top 64. It's definitely not the main focus.
Yeah, it's not a
GP,
it's not right?
Like you're competing to win prizes. No, it's just the glory, I guess, of being Cube champion. They did hand out like Sprecker's root beer. If you 3-0'd a draft, you got a can of root beer because they were like a sponsor of the event. Which was pretty funny.
I wouldn't be surprised if this blows up if like there actually are stakes added to this in future years, because it sounds like this. You said this basically doubled from last year's size, and I heard a lot of like buzz from people who went and coverage and people who weren't able to go saying like, oh, this CubeCon thing is real, like we should go next year. So I wouldn't be surprised if this like just kind of blows up over the course of the next year or 2.
I mean, I can only hope that more people decide to go and it gets even bigger. I will say they're definitely not like profiting anything off of it. So like if they wanted to make prizes, they would need to just charge people even more money to go, probably, which is, it's already like a little bit expensive. So
not the direction you want something like this to go necessarily.
No, I think they're pretty happy keeping it like casual. Like I said, it was kind of they said like casual plus rules level, which meant like if you could like kind of take something back as long as it like, wasn't too serious.
Yeah.
It wasn't like an actual tripping match.
F&M rules kind of.
Which kind of like F&M, which I think is good because there's definitely a wide variety of people, like, experience level and also just attitude towards the event. Like some people were really going for trying to get a trophy every round, and some people were just not playing in all the events and just like, just having fun, which is totally fine. So
yeah, I don't know that you necessarily want to attract like the spikiest of spikes to an event like that if you know that people are coming just to like kind of casually hang out and show off cubes and stuff like that, which, Yeah,
it's a little bit difficult situation, but I think they handled it pretty well. The judges were all like super impressive with how they handled cubes with like altered rules and cubes with like freaking silver bordered cards and like I don't know, just having so many people draft all these cards they've never seen before is just bound to lead to weird rules interactions and like people making mistakes. But overall, I thought it was handled pretty well. So
nice. Well, congrats on your final record for the weekend. Before we get into the actual cubes that you drafted or anything like that, did you notice any like obvious changes in structure or like mentality between last year and this year? Or is it just kind of more of the same, just with more people?
I would say that in terms of the structure, the structure was the same. I think like 3 drafts per day, and then top 64 and top 8. There were a few more like external events, I think, that happened this year. There was, unfortunately, they scheduled them during the main event drafts, so I didn't actually watch them. I think that's kind of a flaw. I think they should do them on like Thursday or something where people aren't playing. But they had like a panel with some Wizards employees. I think like Gavin Verhey was there, and Melissa DeTora, David McDarby, all those kind of people were there. They had a trivia game show that I mentioned that Reed Duke went to. So there were some more things like that. I think the production quality of they streamed the event on NRG's Twitch channel. I think the production quality was a lot higher. They had like a full roster of commentators, which was pretty fun.
Yeah, I know a lot of people got to comment on their own cubes, which is always fun.
Yeah, so I don't know if I explained this, but basically one draft in each round was chosen to be like the feature draft. So they would go sit up front, and there would be like cameras, and they would kind of like at the Pro Tour, they would have like a camera over someone's shoulder looking at the cards they would draft, and then they would show, obviously the 3 rounds and like in the draft. So yeah.
Did you end up in a feature match at all?
No, I didn't. No, it was kind of just random.
Unbelievable.
So no, I didn't end up. No,
hiding those hands from the world. What a shame.
No, I did last year. It is kind of fun to play on camera, but no, I didn't end up this year.
Okay, let's go ahead and move into the actual cubes. And I figured I would just kind of give you the floor here. You don't have to go over literally every single cube you drafted and every deck that you built, but what are some of the standouts? What were some of your favorite cubes from the weekend? Maybe favorite decks of yours. Did you encounter any cards that you had like never seen before? Weird rules, stuff like that. Basically, floor is yours here to talk about some of your favorite experiences with the cubes that you actually drafted.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think part of the fun of CubeCon is definitely drafting like a huge variety of different cubes. So like, obviously I drafted a few cubes that were kind of like normal-ish, like legacy high power cubes. I drafted like an all uncommons cube, which is, like a peasant cube, but without commons, obviously. But some of the more interesting ones were something like there was one called Companion Cube, where you could choose any card to be your companion, which sounds a little bit crazy. But essentially, I chose Ren 6 as my companion. I drafted like a pretty cool land deck with Valakut.
Any card, like period,
any card,
companions.
Literally any card. Yeah, and without the companion text. So it was very interesting because essentially you could just like totally commit to building around any one card. So that was pretty cool. That was definitely one of the more like, mind-bending draft experiences, because like any card you see in the pack is like, oh, what if I made this my companion? What if I made that my companion? So that was cool. Yeah.
Was that like, so that sounds kind of like a commander type thing, where did you have to like your first pick is your companion, or just at any point in the draft, like you could pick a card and be like, that's going to be
you actually can choose at any point. There's no like restrictions like color identity. You could even swap it out during different games or different matches. You could choose another one.
Sounds like a high power thing.
Yeah, it was definitely pretty high power level, that's for sure. Another cool cube that I drafted was Museum of Modern, which was basically, it was like kind of trying to emulate the like modern constructed format from like, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I would say, like back when there was like Splinter Twin and Birthing Pod and like Naya Zoo, classic blue-white control and affinity, things like that. So that one was actually non-singleton. It had like multiple copies of like Lightning Bolt and Path Exile, Snapcaster Mage, things like that.
That's cool.
So that was pretty fun.
What'd you end up drafting for that one?
I drafted Zoo, which with like Step Links, Wild Nacatl, all those guys. It was, Naya splashing Lingering Souls off of Black Shocklands.
So that was basically the cards that don't get there anymore cube, right? Like
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was kind of like, I'm too young to actually have nostalgia for when this was happening, but it was still kind of fun. to do. I joked I have like secondhand nostalgia from just like hearing about all these old modern decks and whatnot.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. I know there was a 2007 nostalgia cube, I want to say. Maybe.
Yep.
I imagine there's a lot of people like sporting like old border cubes and things, like people just showing off like things from a different time.
Yeah. So there was an old border cube, which I played last year. I didn't play this year. That one's super cool. That was obviously only old border cards, but it did include new cards that had like retro framed old border.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that was one. There was also pre-modern cube, which is, I don't know if you know pre-modern format. It's like just the opposite of modern, basically. So that's like a mostly old border, but had some new cards, I think. And then there was, 2007 nostalgia, which is like slightly later than that I drafted. Yeah, that might be my favorite deck that I drafted the whole weekend. It was an Abzan, mostly green-black, like recurring nightmare survival of the fittest deck. My pack 1 pick 1 was survival, my pack 1 pick 2 was recurring nightmare, so I was like, yep, I guess I know what I'm doing. Nice. This draft.
So was that environment, just to clarify, is that all cards from 2007 or just like everything up to 2007?
No, definitely up to and before 2007.
Because somebody in
not just 2007. That would be weird.
Somebody in the community said they joined it thinking that it was like, oh, this is going to be everything from 2007 cube, and I was like, that's very specific.
No, I have like Dark Ritual in my deck, so I don't think so.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that one.
Yeah, so I had Recurring Nightmare, Survival of the Fittest. That was one kind of combo. I had Earthcraft, Squirrel Nest.
Oh, nice.
Which is another infinite combo. I don't know if you know that one. So Squirrel Nest, you put it on a land, you tap it to make a squirrel, and then you use Earthcraft to untap the land.
Yeah.
So you just get infinite squirrels.
Famous commander combo there.
Yeah. I also had Natural Order for a Verdant Force, which is
the 8 mana thing.
Yeah, the 8 mana thing that makes a bunch of Saprolings.
Nice.
That was cool. I had Yosei and Kakusho, both of the Kamigawa dragons.
This deck sounds awesome.
Very, very good Recurring Nightmare targets, I will say. If you get like Yosei and Recurring Nightmare, you basically just win the game because you just like Time Walk your opponent by tapping all their lands.
Yeah. Yosei's the one that like your opponent just skips their untap step, right?
Yeah, and then you tap 5 permanents that they control.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I also had Dark Ritual Hypnotic Spectre, which I didn't get to do on turn whatever, but I did do it once, which was pretty fun.
That does sound fun. That sounds like the type of broken cubes that I would like maybe avoid myself. That's not my cup of tea, but I understand why people like flop to stuff like that.
It's kind of funny where like the enablers are all really busted, but the payoffs are like Verdant Force, you know? So it's like, honestly, like maybe half my games I just won with Earthcraft Scroll Nest, because I had Demonic Tutor and Enlightened Tutor to set up the combo. And that's just 2 enchantments that are like very difficult to interact with.
Yeah.
It's just like better Splinter Twin, pretty much. So yeah.
The one that stood out to me that I heard about was the Cascade Cube. Can you talk about that one a little bit? That one seemed like just whenever people bring their cubes where they're basically adding a rule to the cube, those are the ones where I'm like, I wonder how this actually plays out.
Yeah. So Cascade Cube. Let's see. Both players start with a Maelstrom Nexus emblem in play, which means the first spell you cast each turn has Cascade. Yeah, it's definitely maybe one of the craziest like gameplay experiences of all the cubes. It totally kind of changes your power level evaluation. Basically, any spell you can cast for less mana than its actual mana value is like extremely good. Like Force of Will, for example, was one of my first. So I drafted this cube, and yeah, Force of Will was one of my first picks, which is obviously really good because you pay 0 mana, you put your card, and then you get to Cascade for 5 mana worth of stuff.
On your opponent's turn, too, right? You get a Cascade on their turn and a Cascade on your turn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I actually drafted a mono blue deck that had Foil, which is another pitch counterspell, had Force of Will. It had this card Whiplash Trap, which probably no one's ever heard of before because it's a random comment from Zendikar, but it's 3 blue, you
bounce
like
2 creatures.
You bounce 2 creatures, but if an opponent's had 2 creatures enter the battlefield under their control, this turn it only costs a single blue mana.
Oh, that's fun.
Basically, and that happens pretty often because people will cast a creature Cascade into another creature, and then you just Whiplash Trap them for 1 blue mana, and then you Cascade for 5.
That seems nutty.
So yeah, that was definitely a wild cube. I had a bunch of some delve spells like Murktide Regent, Temporal Trespass, which is another way to cheat the Cascade thing. I had like Brainstorm, and Brainstone as well, and Preordain, where you could like stack the top of your deck, right, to set up your cascades. Unfortunately, I had, as my 0 mana spell, I had Shield Sphere, which is not a very good one. I don't know if you know that card.
It's a 0/7 or something.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, the thing about if you have a 0 mana card in your deck, that means all your 1 mana spells are going to hit it every time. So it's like, you usually want to have one of those. And in the cube, there's like Lotus Bloom, there's Soul Talisman, which is the Soul Ring, and there's like the Rainbow Mox also that you can, those are like the suspend cards that you can cascade into. So those are kind of like the power of the cube that you really want. But unfortunately, I had the Shield Sphere.
You just played it because it's basically a free card every time.
Yeah, I just played it because it's just free, and you're basically you might as well get some free value off your 1 mana cards that you wouldn't get otherwise.
Sounds super cool. Those are the type of cubes where I imagine like it's not even tried and it can't be worth it to like try to go into that with like a spiky mentality, right? Like how do you even spike an environment like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I have played this a couple times before. It's definitely, even after playing it like maybe 3 times, I'm still like not entirely sure how to evaluate cards just because it's so radically different. I mean, I was definitely trying to draft a good deck, but yeah.
All right. Well, Teld wanted to ask this question coming from Teld, which, by the way, Teld and Chris could have been on this call, but we figured having 4 voices in the room when we're really trying to get Theo to talk might not be necessary. But he did leave me a couple questions. He wanted to ask, did you have a favorite card or favorite cards that you drafted that week? Maybe cards that you had never even seen before.
Let's see. There's another modified rules cube that I drafted that was maybe even more crazy than the Cascade cube that definitely had some cards I'd never seen before in my entire life, which was the Changeling cube, which was all your creatures are every creature type.
Oh.
So it's another kind of thing where both players have an emblem pretty much that says all your creatures are every creature type. And that also leads to some pretty degenerate things. There's some ally cards that are really broken when all your creatures are allies. There's like elf tribal cards that are similarly very good when all your creatures are elves. I had this card called Siege Dragon, which is like a rare...
Blows up the walls.
It's from like M15 or something that I'd never read before in my entire life. But it's like a dragon that destroys all your opponent's walls.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which is just plague wind. So that was pretty hilarious. Like just having this just junk rare become like the most broken card in the whole cube.
That's awesome. Yeah, Siege Dragon has never seen play anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. There was like Priest of Titania was another one where it taps for each elf on the battlefield, which includes your opponent's elves.
Gross.
So that's pretty gross. Had Kessig Malcontents, where you deal damage to your opponent equal to the number of humans you control. So definitely killed some people out of nowhere with that. Let's see, Treefolk Harbinger is just like Vampire Tutor, basically.
Fetches up a Treefolk, right? Puts it on top of your library.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that cube definitely had some cool cards I've never seen before. There's one called Halimar Excavator, which is an ally you might know from...
I think that's the mill one,
some
right?
Some Zendikar set. Yeah, so it says whenever an ally enters the battlefield under your control, you mill your opponent equal to the number of allies you have.
And everything's an ally, yeah.
And yeah, all your creatures are allies. So basically, if you just play a bunch of creatures, you like mill your opponent for 3, mill them for 4, mill them for 5, and like in a 40-card deck, that just adds up extremely quickly. They just get decked out very fast.
There's not really like a strategy to draft in that cube, right? You're just trying to do the sweetest thing, right?
Yeah, it was... I think the intent of the designer was to, basically have everyone do just really broken creature synergies. There wasn't like a ton of interaction. Yeah, I mean, you can have a strategy. There was actually, one player tried to draft like a Storm combo deck with like Glimpse of Nature and Heritage Druid, which is pretty broken. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah,
one.
the elf.
It's like tap 3 elves to add 3 green mana, and there's some Saproling tribal cards that are really broken when all your creatures are Saprolings. There's one that just says, like, sack a Saproling, add 1 mana of any color. It's like a 1-drop. So that was pretty interesting.
I mean, that sounds like a blast.
Yeah, I mean, I think I brought up some of the more crazy cubes, but I definitely also just, like, drafted some cubes that were just good, good fair Magic with, like, interactive, more normal things.
Yeah.
I think what I like about it is that since you can rank your choice of cubes, it's not just random ones. You can just draft the kind of cubes you like to draft. If you like only want to draft peasant cubes or like themed cubes, you can do that. If you like only want to draft legacy vintage cubes, you can pretty much do that. Like I think I got one of my top 3 cubes every round except for one round.
I was gonna ask
put into a random one.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if there were any that you missed out on that you wish you had gotten in the draft.
That's a good question. Let me see. I did want to draft the Storm Time cube, which is like supposedly it's like a storm themed cube, but it's not just like like Tendrils of Agony Storm, but it's like kind of like the Strixhaven Magecraft Storm, also like kind of almost low power level Storm, where you're just like casting a bunch of spells for value, and that one looked pretty fun to play.
It's like a Spellslinger cube of sorts.
Yeah, kind of like a Spellslinger cube, yeah.
Gotcha. Teld also wanted to ask, last question from Teld, did you have any plays from the weekend, like any personal plays that stick in memory? I know Siege Rhino blowing up your opponent's board is kind of cool, but anything along those lines that you're like, yeah, at CubeCon I did this,
Yeah, there was actually, so in the companion cube that I mentioned before, I played against someone who had their companion was Dark Depths. So they had a Vampire Hexmage in their deck, right? So they were basically just trying to...
Oh, your companion could be a land too?
Yes, so yeah, it could also be a land. So they had Dark Depths as their companion, right? And I was, like I mentioned, I was playing like a land stack with a red and 6. Mm-hmm. So I had taken Thespian Stage in the draft because I had actually seen the Dark Depths and I was trying to wheel it. So I took Thespian Stage, but then what I did is I sideboarded in Thespian Stage against the Dark Depths player because
Amazing.
You could copy any land with Thespian Stage. So then I had Knight of the Reliquary in my deck, so on my opponent's end step I tutored up Thespian Stage and I copied their Dark Depths that was in play. And I made a 2020.
I'd be so tilted.
Killed them out of nowhere. They were actually in pretty good spirits about it because I think they were just so surprised that they did not expect that.
I mean, you can't be too mad losing matches at CubeCon.
No, you can't.
Come on now. That is kind of awesome, though. I had a question, kind of my final question here. You were in Madison, Wisconsin. I don't know anything about Wisconsin, really, other than cheese, apparently. Outside of CubeCon, do you have any good food?
Yeah, I did have some good food. I had some good Indian food from a place called Swad, I think. Had some good pancakes from a place called Short Stack Eatery in downtown Wisconsin. Downtown Madison. Had some good pizza.
It's half the appeal of going to stuff like this is the food that you get. Was that a far travel for you? You drove, right?
I actually flew this year. Last year I drove, did a road trip with a bunch of other people, but this year I just decided to fly, which was a bit easier for me. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, like I don't know if you ever got around to a GP or anything like that before those kind of stopped happening, but this feels to me as like an outsider looking in, like what the old GPs were, where you would go for a weekend and half the excuse of going was that you would just get to go eat good food in whatever city you were in and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've never actually been to a GP. I think they kind of stopped when I started playing that.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a similar vibe. Like half the fun is definitely hanging out with my friends from like Baltimore and from New York that I haven't seen in like about a year. And yeah, eating food, of course.
Yeah, that's awesome. In fact, I think you told us that you got knocked out of top 64 or top 8 or whatever by one of your friends, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, unfortunately, we sat down to the top 64 draft, and you know who you're going to play because you do like diagonal across the table. Yeah, unfortunately, I got knocked out by my friend Allison, but she did end up making the top 8. So
that's cool.
That was, of all the people to get knocked out by, that was
Can't be too mad about it, right?
That's not too bad, yeah.
Okay, well, those are all the questions I had. Did you have anything else you wanted to add or things that people maybe should know about CubeCon if they're considering it for possibly next year? Like I said, I think this is just based on the feedback that I've heard from people who went and people who didn't go, who are looking at it with coverage and stuff like that. I have this like suspicion this is going to blow up over the course of the next couple of years and kind of be a mainstay. Anything people should know just in general about CubeCon if they're deciding whether to go or not, or anything else you wanted to wrap up with here?
Well, I would just say it's like, I don't know, it's definitely the most fun Magic event that I've ever been to. And I think a lot of people feel the same way, who are passionate about Cube. It's definitely expanding in popularity due to like, I don't know, maybe LSV, like drafting Cube on YouTube or the vintage Cube like on Magic Online. And Yeah, I'll just say if you're not sure whether you want to go, like, there's definitely room to have fun if you're being competitive. There's also room to have fun if you're super casual about Cube and like if you're concerned that you don't want to enter like a big tournament, like that definitely doesn't have to be the case. There are people who just didn't even enter the main event the whole time and just drafted wild unsanctioned cubes like in side events basically the whole time.
Red Dan Dan.
Had a ton of fun. Yeah, like Red Dan Dan. So yeah, I would just say go to CubeCon if you're on the fence. I highly recommend it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think we were talking. Chris Teld and I were talking kind of last weekend. We were rooting you on from the shadows. We were like, yeah, this might just be like something that as a community we kind of have to like try to do, you know, get a Jank Diver Gaming cube into CubeCon. It's not in the cards for a lot of us,
absolutely.
but it's one of those things too where it's like, well, what would we even pitch as our cube, you know, if we were going to try to go to CubeCon, because we do all of our cubing on Arena. You know, I don't know how much like historic cube appeals to people who would be going to this sort of event. But yeah, I think that's going to be a next step for us. Maybe next year, like we'll see how everybody's doing by then. But we're really like, okay, CubeCon is a real thing. Like, if we're going to try to be like contenders in the cube sphere, we need to get a Jank Diver Gaming cube into CubeCon, and we need to like get our butts up and go if we can. So that's going to be a goal for us.
That's a great goal. Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe I'll run into you at one of these events within the next couple of years. We shall see. But yeah, thanks for coming on and just kind of humoring us again. Congratulations on just kind of running the tables, you know, smashing people in their typal cubes and stuff like that, and you know, representing the community. You know, one of the best players that we have in this sphere. But thanks for your time and just kind of feedback on CubeCon. It seems like it was an awesome time.
Yeah. Anytime, I'm happy to be the CubeCon field reporter for the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like honestly twofold, right? Like, oh, look, Theo did really well. Let's get him on the show because that'll make us look good. But also, like, Theo did really well. Like, why don't we get him to, you know, tell us about his experiences and stuff, that sort of thing. So, appreciate you taking the time on a Sunday to come chat with us about it. But that's going to go ahead and do it for this episode. Thanks, as always, to everyone listening. Remember, the best way to support Jank Diver Gaming and the Jank Tank is to join the Discord server. Come draft with us. Give us your feedback. It's a great place to hang out with like-minded individuals, talk about Q, Retail Limited, all things Magic. We draft our more powerful unrestricted cube on Sundays at 7:30 Eastern, our Peasant Cube and Specialty Cubes at 7:30 Eastern on Wednesdays. And you can find links to the Discord server wherever you're listening to this podcast. Theo, in case you haven't caught on, I'm reading scripted material now, in case that wasn't obvious. You can check out our socials. Find us on Twitter at JankDiverGaming, youtube.com/JankDiverGaming, and you can find Teld at twitch.tv/TeldTalks, TELD Talks, and stay tuned next episode where we'll hopefully have the streamer thing sorted out and figure out who is going to be there. Theo, thanks again for taking the time to come talk to us about CubeCon, and I'm sure we will have you on an episode sometime in the future. In fact, you know, I should have said welcome back to the show at the beginning, because you were technically on
that's true.
a couple episodes of the old Deep Dive podcast, but, you know, we're the Jank Tank now. It's a completely different thing.
Completely different.
Yeah,
yep.
Way different. But yeah, thanks for hanging out, and hopefully we'll get you back on here for some future topics.
Yep. All right. Yeah.
All right. Take it easy.